My husband quietly told me to transfer his entire $25 million fortune to my account. 48 hours after he died, my son came and demanded to share his inheritance. My husband's words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at my husband, Alexander Grant, the man I'd loved for 31 years, the self-made millionaire who'd built an empire from nothing, and didn't recognize the fear in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" My wine glass slipped from my fingers, red liquid spreading across our white tablecloth like blood. He didn't flinch, just slid a piece of paper across our dining table with hands that shook worse than they had since his stroke 5 years ago. Account numbers, routing codes, instructions written in his sharp, angular handwriting. "Transfer everything in my name to yours, every account, every asset, before midnight." His voice was flat, dead. "It has to be tonight." I grabbed the paper, my pulse thundering in my ears. This was insane. My husband was asking me to move our entire fortune in the middle of the night like some kind of criminal. "Alexander, what the hell is going on? Don't ask questions." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against hardwood. "Just do it, please, Risa." "No." I stood too, my legs shaky. "You don't get to drop this on me and walk away. Is this about the company? Did something happen at Grant Industries?" His jaw clenched. For a moment I thought he'd ignore me. "Then, it's about Luke, our son." My chest tightened. "What about Luke?" "He's been stealing from me." The words came out bitter, sharp. $4.2 million over 3 years. Fake vendor contracts. Shell companies. I found the paper trail last month. The room tilted. I gripped the table's edge to stay upright. Luke Grant, our only child, the boy I'd raised, the man who was supposed to take over his father's legacy, was a thief? "You're lying." But even as I said it, pieces clicked into place. Luke's new Porsche last year, the vacation house in Cabo, Eve's diamond earrings that cost more than my car. All on a CFO's salary that, while generous, shouldn't have afforded that lifestyle. Eve Grant, my daughter-in-law, Luke's wife of 6 years, with her perfect smile and her charity galas, and her way of asking about Alexander's will at every family dinner. I wish I was lying. Alexander moved to his study's door, his limp more pronounced than usual. I confronted him 2 weeks ago. He didn't deny it. Said I owed him, that he'd earned it by living in my shadow. The pain in his voice cracked something inside me. "Alexander!" He threatened me, Marissa. He turned and I saw it then, the raw, devastating fear of a father betrayed by his own blood. Said if I went to the police or cut him out, he'd destroy everything. The company's reputation, my name, yours. He's been planning this for years and I was too blind to see it. My knees gave out. I sank into my chair, my mind reeling. "So you're protecting the money, moving it where he can't touch it." "I'm protecting you." He crossed back to me, kneeling beside my chair and gripping my hands. His palms were ice cold. "Luke's not just greedy, Rissa. He's desperate, and desperate people do terrible things." "What kind of terrible things?" He didn't answer, just stared at me with those gray eyes that had once been so confident, so certain, now filled with a knowledge that made my stomach turn. "Alexander, what aren't you telling me?" "Everything that matters." He stood, pulling me up with him. "But right now, I need you to go to my study. Log into my laptop. Password is your birthday, all numbers. Follow those instructions exactly. Transfer every penny. And Marissa?" His grip on my hands tightened. "Don't tell anyone. Not your friends. Not Patricia. Especially not Luke. No matter what he says, no matter what happens, this stays between us." "You're scaring me." "Good." He kissed my forehead, his lips lingering like a goodbye. "Fear will keep you sharp. You're going to need that." He released me and headed for the stairs. "Alexander, wait, where are you going?" "To bed. I'm tired." He paused on the bottom step, his back to me. "I love you, Marissa Grant. More than I ever found the words to say. Remember that, okay? Whatever happens next, remember I did this to protect you." Then he climbed the stairs, each step slow and deliberate, leaving me alone in our dining room with a piece of paper that felt like a loaded gun. I looked at the clock. 10:34 p.m. I had less than 90 minutes to decide if I trusted my husband's paranoia or my son's innocence. Except Luke wasn't innocent. Alexander had proof. $4.2 million worth of proof. My hands shook as I walked to Alexander's study, the masculine sanctuary of dark wood and leather where he'd spent countless nights building his fortune. His laptop sat open on the desk, screen dark. I touched the mousepad and it flared to life, password prompt glowing. My birthday. May 17, 1962. The desktop loaded. I pulled up his banking portal, my heart hammering so hard I could barely breathe. Account after account appeared. Checking, savings, investment portfolios, money market accounts, real estate holdings, stock options, $25,347,892.18. The number was incomprehensible. Alexander had always handled the finances. I knew we were wealthy. Our mansion in Blackhawk, the vacation home in Tahoe, my platinum credit card that never had a limit. But seeing it all laid out like this, every dollar we'd accumulated over 3 decades. I pulled out the paper, started with the first account, entered my account number. The one I'd opened when we got married, the one I barely used anymore because Alexander preferred I use our joint accounts. Transferred the full balance. A pop-up appeared. Are you sure you want to transfer $4,847,223.67? My finger hovered over the mouse. This was crazy. This was... Luke's face flashed through my mind. 10 years old, crying because he'd been caught stealing candy from the grocery store. But I wanted it, Mom. He'd sobbed. Why should I have to wait when we have the money? Even then, there'd been something off in his logic. Something entitled. I clicked confirm. The money vanished from Alexander's account. 3 seconds later, my phone chimed. Deposit notification. My account now held more money than I'd ever imagined possessing. I moved to the next account, then the next. Each transfer felt like I was dismantling my husband's life piece by piece, moving his legacy into my name like a thief in the night. Maybe that's what I was. Maybe Luke had learned from the best. No. I shoved the thought away. Alexander had asked me to do this, trusted me with everything he'd built. There had to be a reason, a good reason. The clock in the study chimed. 11 p.m. I worked faster. Investment accounts, bonds, stock portfolios. The vacation property deed, I'd have to handle that paperwork tomorrow, but I made notes. Everything. Alexander said everything. By 11:47 p.m., I was transferring the last account, a money market fund I'd never even known existed. $892,442.88. I hit confirm. My phone exploded with notifications, email confirmations, text alerts, my banking app practically screaming about the sudden influx of wealth. I took a screenshot of everything, saved it to a folder on the desktop labeled insurance, the same folder that held our home insurance, car insurance, life insurance policies. Just another policy, just another protection plan. Except this one protected me from my own son. I closed the laptop. The study suddenly felt suffocating, the walls pressing in. The photograph on Alexander's desk caught my eye, the two of us in Greece 15 years ago, before Luke had grown cold, before the stroke, before everything turned complicated. We looked happy, young, naive. I picked up the frame, traced Alexander's smile with my finger. "What have you gotten us into?" I whispered to his frozen image. The house creaked, old pipes settling, familiar sounds that usually comforted me, but tonight they sounded ominous, threatening. I set down the frame and headed upstairs. Our bedroom door was closed. I eased it open, expecting to find Alexander awake, waiting for confirmation. He was asleep, or pretending to be. Curled on his side, breathing deep and steady, his left hand tucked under his pillow. I slid into bed beside him, my body rigid with tension. The sheets were cool. The room was dark. Everything was normal, everything was fine. Except, nothing would ever be fine again. I stared at the ceiling, listening to my husband breathe, knowing that something fundamental had shifted in our marriage tonight. He'd kept secrets, big ones, the kind that festered and grew until they consumed everything. How long had he known about Luke's theft? Weeks? Months? Had he lain here night after night, harboring this betrayal while I'd slept beside him, oblivious? What else didn't I know? Alexander's hand found mine in the darkness. His fingers intertwined with mine, gripping tight like he was drowning and I was his only lifeline. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. Or tears. I couldn't tell. "I love you, Rissa. Remember that." "I love you too." The words felt hollow. Love wasn't supposed to come with secrets and midnight money transfers and warnings about your own child. His grip tightened, then relaxed. His breathing evened out. I lay there for hours watching shadows move across our ceiling, feeling the weight of $25 million pressing down on my chest like a stone. At 3:17 a.m., I finally slept. I didn't know it was the last peaceful moment we'd ever share. The morning sun hit my face like an accusation. I woke to find Alexander's side of the bed empty, sheets cold. The clock read 7:42 a.m. Panic seized me. I bolted upright, heart racing. Had something happened? Had Luke... "Rissa?" Alexander appeared in the doorway, fully dressed in his charcoal suit, the one he wore to important board meetings. He carried a cup of coffee. My favorite mug, the chipped blue one from our honeymoon. "Didn't mean to wake you. I have an early meeting at the office." He looked normal, rested even, like last night had never happened. "You're going to work?" My voice came out sharper than intended. "After everything you told me last night, you're just... going to the office?" "Life goes on, sweetheart." He crossed to the bed, set the coffee on my nightstand, and kissed my forehead. His lips were warm, real. Besides, we can't let Luke know anything's changed. Business as usual. Business as usual. While my husband played Russian roulette with our son, "Alexander, we need to talk about this. About what happens next. If Luke really has been stealing, not now." He straightened, adjusting his tie. "I have a plan. Trust me." There was that word again. Trust. Like it was simple. Like he hadn't just shattered every assumption I'd held about our family. He headed for the door, then paused, turned back. "Marissa, if anything happens, if I call you or if Luke calls you about me, I need you to remember everything I told you last night. Remember that I love you, and remember that you did the right thing." The words sent ice through my veins. "If anything happens?" Alexander, what the hell does that mean? "It means be careful." His gray eyes held mine. "Luke has always been charming, persuasive. Don't let him convince you to undo what we did, no matter what story he tells. You're talking like you expect something to happen today." "I always expect the worst. That's how I built an empire." A sad smile crossed his face. "But I hope for the best. See you tonight, Rissa." Then he was gone. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, the front door opening and closing, his Mercedes starting in the driveway. I sat there holding my coffee, steam curling up like ghosts, and felt the weight of dread settling into my bones. At 10:03 a.m., my phone chimed with a text from Alexander. "Coffee was perfect. Love you." I stared at those 3 words. Coffee was perfect, and felt an inexplicable urge to screenshot the message, to save it, like I knew somehow that I'd need proof he'd been okay this morning, that he'd left our house alive and well and thinking about my coffee. I saved it, then hated myself for the paranoia. The day crawled by with agonizing normalcy. I went to my 11 a.m. Pilates class at the country club, where Patricia Monroe, my friend of 15 years, talked endlessly about her ex-husband's new girlfriend. At lunch, Margaret Chen showed me photos of her grandson. I smiled, laughed at the right moments, pretended my world wasn't balancing on a knife's edge. No one noticed. Why would they? I'd spent 31 years perfecting the role of Alexander Grant's gracious wife, the woman who hosted charity galas, who remembered everyone's birthdays, who never complained about the long hours her husband worked. The woman who apparently didn't know her own son was a criminal. By 4 p.m. I was home, unloading groceries I didn't remember buying. Salmon for dinner, the wild-caught kind Alexander preferred. Asparagus, red potatoes, a bottle of Chardonnay. I was seasoning the fish when my phone rang. Luke's name flashed on the screen. My hand froze. Every warning Alexander had given me ricocheted through my mind. Don't trust him, don't tell him, he's desperate. But he was still my son, my baby boy. The child I'd rocked through nightmares and cheered at soccer games and driven to college, moved to in day while crying in the parking lot afterward. I answered. Luke? Is everything okay? Mom. His voice was strained, tight. Dad collapsed at the office. They're taking him to Memorial Hospital. I'm already here. The phone slipped from my hand, clattered against the granite counter. No. No. Mom? Mom, are you there? I grabbed the phone with shaking hands. What happened? Is he okay? What? Just get here. Now. The line went dead. I stood frozen in my kitchen, salmon forgotten, the room spinning. This was what Alexander had warned me about. This was what he'd seen coming. My keys. Where were my keys? I found them on the entry table, grabbed my purse, and ran for the garage. My hands shook so badly I could barely start the car. The drive to Memorial Hospital took 12 minutes that felt like 12 years. Luke had called at 6:23 p.m. I'd looked at the clock when my phone rang. 6:23 p.m. Why did that matter? Why did some part of my brain think that detail was important? I screeched into the hospital parking lot, abandoned my car half in a loading zone, and sprinted for the emergency entrance. The automatic doors seemed to move in slow motion. Inside, fluorescent lights burned too bright. Antiseptic smell choked me. A nurse at the desk looked up as I stumbled toward her. Alexander Grant, I gasped. My husband. He collapsed. Where? Room 7, down the hall and to the right. I ran. My heels clicked against linoleum. Left, right. Room numbers blurred past. 3, 5, 7. I burst through the door and found Luke Grant standing beside a hospital bed, talking in low tones with a doctor. My son turned, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed. Beside him stood Eve Grant, my daughter-in-law, her hand on Luke's arm. She wore a black dress. Why was she wearing black? Had she been at a funeral, or had she known to dress for one? The thought was insane. I shoved it away. Mom. Luke moved toward me and I saw past him to the bed. Alexander lay motionless, a sheet pulled up to his chest. Too still, too white. No. The word escaped like a prayer. No, he can't be. The doctor, young, tired, with a name tag that read Dr. Patel, stepped forward. Mrs. Grant, I'm so sorry. Your husband suffered a massive heart attack. By the time the paramedics arrived, he'd been without oxygen for several minutes. We did everything we could, but... His words faded to white noise. I pushed past him, past Luke, past Eve with her widow's weeds and her sympathetic expression. I reached Alexander's bedside, touched his hand. Cold, already cold. No, I said again stupidly, like I could argue him back to life. He was fine this morning. He made me coffee. He went to work. He texted me. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers, showed Dr. Patel the message like it was evidence. See? 103. Coffee was perfect. Love you. He was fine. Cardiac events can happen suddenly, Mrs. Grant. Especially in patients with your husband's history, the prior stroke, his age, the stress of running a major company. Age. Alexander was only 63. That wasn't old. That was supposed to be the beginning of our golden years. Retirement, travel, grandchildren we'd never have because our son was too busy stealing from us. Luke's hand landed on my shoulder. Mom, I'm so sorry. I know this is... I shrugged him off, couldn't bear his touch. My son, the thief, the liar. Had he done this? Had he... Mrs. Grant? Dr. Patel's voice was gentle. Would you like a few minutes alone with your husband? I nodded, mute with grief. We'll be right outside, Luke said. Take all the time you need. They filed out, Dr. Patel, Luke, Eve. The door clicked shut with horrible finality. I sank into the chair beside Alexander's bed, still gripping his cold hand. He looked peaceful, like he was sleeping. Any moment he'd open his eyes and smile at me, and this would be a nightmare I'd wake from. But his chest didn't rise, didn't fall, just stillness, the final absolute stillness of death. You knew, I whispered to him. Last night you knew this would happen. You felt it coming, didn't you? That's why you made me transfer everything. That's why you said goodbye. Had it been his heart? Or had it been Luke? The thought was poison, corrosive. What kind of mother suspected her own son of murder? The kind whose husband had warned her their son was capable of terrible things. I leaned forward, pressed my forehead against Alexander's still hand. What do I do now? My voice cracked. You left me with instructions and warnings and $25 million, but you didn't tell me how to survive this, how to figure out if our son killed you, how to live in a world where you're not here. Silence answered me. The beep of monitors in other rooms, the distant intercom paging doctors, the hollow sound of my own breathing. I stayed there for 20 minutes, an hour. I lost track of time. Finally, a nurse knocked softly and entered. Mrs. Grant? I'm so sorry, but we need to move your husband to the morgue. There are some papers you'll need to sign. Papers, always papers, transfer papers, death certificates, the bureaucracy of loss. I stood on shaking legs, bent to kiss Alexander's forehead one last time. His skin was waxen, wrong. He was gone, and I was alone, and nothing would ever be right again. In the hallway, Luke and Eve waited. Luke's eyes were red, his face drawn. Eve checked her phone, then quickly pocketed it when she saw me watching. Mom. Luke stepped forward, tried to embrace me. I'm so sorry, I know you two. You were everything to each other. I let him hug me, my body rigid. His cologne, expensive, cloying, made my stomach turn. Over his shoulder, I saw Eve watching us. Her expression was neutral, appropriate, but something in her eyes was wrong, calculating. What happened? I heard myself ask. At the office. What exactly happened? Luke pulled back. Dad called me to his office around 6 p.m. He seemed upset, agitated. I thought maybe we could talk, but he swallowed hard. He started yelling. Something about the Meridian account. I tried to calm him down, but he just got more worked up. Then he grabbed his chest and collapsed. I called 911 immediately, but around 6 p.m., I repeated. The time felt significant. And you called me at 6:23. Yeah, right after the ambulance left. Luke frowned. Why? Does the timeline matter? No, I trailed off. My grief-fogged brain was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't grasp it. Never mind. Eve and I will handle all the arrangements, Luke continued. The funeral, the death notices, notifying the company. You shouldn't have to deal with any of that. That's very kind, I said flatly. You should go home and rest. We'll take care of everything. Eve spoke for the first time, her voice smooth as silk. You've had a terrible shock. Yes, a terrible shock. The kind that comes when your husband dies 48 hours after making you complicit in whatever scheme he'd orchestrated to protect you from your own son. I'll drive myself home. I moved past them toward the exit. Thank you for calling me. Mom, wait! Luke called after me, but I kept walking. Out of the hospital, through the parking lot, into my car that still sat half in the loading zone with a parking ticket under the wiper. I drove home on autopilot, barely seeing the road. The house loomed before me, dark and empty. I parked in the garage, sat in the silent car, and realized I couldn't go inside. Couldn't face that empty bed, that cold kitchen, Alexander's study with his coffee mug still sitting on the desk. Instead, I sat there as darkness fell, replaying every moment of the last 48 hours. The dinner, the transfer, Alexander's warnings, his goodbye that I hadn't recognized as goodbye. At 9:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Luke, just making sure you got home okay. Love you, Mom. I stared at those words. Love you, Mom. From the son who'd stolen millions from his father, from the man who'd been with Alexander when he died, from my child who might have murdered his own father. I didn't respond. Just sat in the darkness holding my phone, and felt the weight of Alexander's trust settling on my shoulders like a shroud. He'd given me everything. His fortune, his warnings, his final act of love. Now I had to figure out what to do with it. I'd survived 3 days since Alexander's death, moving through the motions like a ghost. The funeral had been yesterday, a sea of black suits and empty condolences, business associates who'd respected Alexander but never really known him. Luke had given the eulogy, spoke about his father's legacy, his business acumen, his devotion to family. I'd sat in the front pew and wanted to scream. Now I was home, ensconced in our living room, my living room now, everything was mine now, wearing the same black dress I'd worn to the funeral because I couldn't muster the energy to change. The curtains were drawn. I'd stopped answering my phone after Patricia's 10th call. The doorbell rang at 9 a.m. sharp. I ignored it. Probably another casserole from a neighbor, another bouquet with a card full of platitudes about God's plan and time healing all wounds. The bell rang again, insistent, then knocking. "Mom? Mom, I know you're in there. Please open the door." Luke. Every muscle in my body tensed. I hadn't spoken to him since the hospital. He'd texted daily, checking on me, offering help, asking if I needed anything. I'd responded with short, non-committal replies. "I'm fine, thank you, need time alone." The knocking continued. "Mom, please, we really need to talk." Something in his voice, urgency, impatience, made me stand. I crossed to the foyer, my reflection in the hall mirror catching me off guard. I looked like hell. Unwashed hair, smudged makeup from yesterday, eyes hollowed out by grief and suspicion. I opened the door. Luke stood on my porch in a crisp navy suit, his dark hair perfectly styled. Behind him was Eve, elegant in cream and pearls. Between them stood a man I'd never seen before, 50-ish, silver-haired, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Mom." Luke's relief seemed genuine. "Thank God. We were worried about you." "Who's this?" I looked at the stranger. "This is Gerald Vance," Luke said. "Our attorney. Can we come in? We need to discuss Dad's estate." Our attorney. Not Dad's attorney. That was Leland Fields, Alexander's personal lawyer for 20 years. This was someone new, someone Luke had brought. Warning bells clanged in my skull, but I stepped aside. Of course. They filed into my living room, my sanctuary that still smelled like Alexander's cologne and the lilies from his funeral. Eve sat primly on the sofa. Luke took the armchair Alexander had always claimed as his. Gerald Vance remained standing, setting his briefcase on the coffee table with deliberate precision. I stayed by the doorway, arms crossed. "What's this about?" Gerald Vance opened his briefcase. "Mrs. Grant, I'll get straight to the point. We're aware that you transferred $25 million from your husband's accounts to your personal accounts on the evening of November 18th, 2 days before his death." The air left my lungs. How did they know? The transfers were supposed to be private. "I can see from your expression that you're surprised we know," Vance continued, his tone professionally neutral. "Financial institutions are required to report large transactions, and given the timing, mere hours before your husband's fatal heart attack, we have concerns." "Concerns about what?" My voice came out steady. "Good. I wouldn't let them see me shake." "About undue influence," Vance said. "About the possibility that Alexander Grant was not acting of his own free will when he initiated those transfers. That's insane." But my heart hammered against my ribs. Alexander asked me to make those transfers. Luke leaned forward, his expression pained. "Dad wasn't himself those last few weeks. You said so yourself. Remember at dinner last month? You told Eve you were worried about him, that he seemed paranoid, distracted." Had I said that? Maybe. Alexander had been different, quieter, more withdrawn. I'd attributed it to stress. "We're not accusing you of anything," Eve added quickly, her voice honey-sweet. "We're just concerned that Dad might have been confused. His stroke 5 years ago, the medications he was on, those things can affect judgment. Alexander's judgment was perfect." I moved into the room, stood behind the sofa. He knew exactly what he was doing. "Then why did he transfer everything to you?" Luke's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something raw underneath. Anger. Why would a man who spent his entire life building a company, who always said he wanted his son to take over, why would he cut me out completely? There it was. The real question, the wound that drove all of this. Maybe you should ask yourself that question, Luke. The words escaped before I could stop them. His face darkened. What's that supposed to mean? It means your father had his reasons. What reasons? Luke stood, his hands clenched. Did he tell you something? Did he— Luke. Eve's hand on his arm, pulling him back. Let's stay calm. Gerald Vance pulled papers from his briefcase. Mrs. Grant, I'm afraid we're filing for an estate investigation on the grounds of potential undue influence and elder financial exploitation. These transfers were irregular, suspicious in their timing, and completely legal. I cut him off. Alexander Grant was of sound mind. He made a choice to protect his assets. That's not a crime. It is if someone manipulated him into it. Vance slid the papers across the coffee table toward me. Given your husband's medical history and the unusual circumstances surrounding these transfers, we believe we have grounds for both civil and criminal complaints. Criminal. They were threatening me with criminal charges. This is ridiculous, I said, but my voice shook now. Luke, how can you do this? I'm your mother. Your father just died. And somehow you ended up with everything. Luke's composure cracked completely. $25 million, Mom. The company, the properties, everything Dad built. You, who never worked a day in that business, who just hosted parties and played housewife. You get it all and I get nothing? The venom in his words stung more than any accusation could. Is that what this is about? Money? It's about what's right. He was shouting now. I worked for that company for 10 years. I helped build it. And Dad was going to leave it to me. We talked about it hundreds of times. But then something changed. Those last few months he started looking at me different, started questioning my decisions, and then suddenly everything goes to you, and 2 days later he's dead? The implication hung in the air like smoke. What are you saying, Luke? I asked quietly. I'm saying it's convenient. His jaw was rigid, that's all. Very convenient timing. Mr. Grant, Vance interrupted, a warning in his tone. Let's focus on the legal matters. But the damage was done. My son had just implied I'd manipulated his dying father for money, or worse, that I'd had something to do with Alexander's death. Mom. Eve stood, moved toward me with practiced sympathy. No one's accusing you of anything terrible. We're just concerned. Alexander's death was so sudden, and these transfers were so unusual. Surely you can understand why Luke feels hurt, why we need to make sure everything was legitimate. Her perfume, expensive floral, made me nauseous. I stepped back. I understand my son is more concerned about money than his father's death. I understand my daughter-in-law is standing here in my house, 3 days after my husband's funeral, threatening me with lawyers. We're not threatening you, Vance said. We're offering you a choice. Either we can resolve this privately, or we can let the courts decide. What kind of private resolution? I already knew. Could see it in Luke's eyes. Vance pulled out more papers. We're prepared to settle if you voluntarily transfer 50% of the estate to Luke as the rightful heir. You would retain your marital portion and relinquish any claims to Grant Industries. In exchange, we withdraw all legal challenges and forget this unfortunate situation ever occurred. 50%. Half of everything Alexander had worked to protect. Half of the fortune he'd explicitly moved out of Luke's reach. And if I refuse? Then we file civil and criminal complaints. Vance's tone was matter-of-fact. Elder exploitation carries serious penalties in this state, Mrs. Grant. Prison time, asset forfeiture. Even if you're acquitted, the legal fees alone would decimate the estate. And the publicity. Alexander, Grant's widow, accused of manipulating him on his deathbed. That would destroy both your reputation and the company's. It was a threat. A carefully crafted legal threat, but a threat nonetheless. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. Saw the man he'd become, the entitled boy who'd grown into an entitled adult, who believed the world owed him his father's fortune simply because of his birth order. Alexander had known, had seen this coming, had tried to protect me. Get out. My voice was cold, calm. Get out of my house, Mom. Get out. I moved to the door, held it open. If you want to sue me, Luke, then sue me. But I'm not giving you a single penny that your father didn't want you to have. He made his choice. And so have I." Luke's face flushed red. "You're making a huge mistake. The only mistake I made was opening the door." I kept my gaze steady. "Your father would be ashamed of you." The words hit like a slap. Luke flinched, then his expression hardened into something ugly. "Fine, we'll do this the hard way, but when the truth comes out, when everyone sees what you really are, don't come crying to me." He stormed past me, Eve following with one last pitying look that made my skin crawl. Gerald Vance gathered his papers with infuriating calm. "You'll be served within the week, Mrs. Grant." He handed me a business card. "I'd suggest you retain counsel." Then he was gone, the three of them climbing into Luke's Porsche, the car he'd bought with his father's stolen money, and driving away. I closed the door, locked it, then sank to the floor in my foyer and finally let myself cry. Not for Alexander's death. I'd cried those tears already. These were tears of rage, of betrayal, of the horrible, crushing realization that my son, my baby boy, was exactly the monster his father had warned me about. And whatever game Luke was playing, whatever he'd done to Alexander in that office before he died, I was going to find out. I was going to make him pay. I couldn't sleep. 3 a.m. found me pacing through our house, my house, jumping at shadows, replaying Luke's threats on an endless loop. When the truth comes out, when everyone sees what you really are. What did he mean? What truth? My feet carried me to Alexander's study without conscious thought. I stood in the doorway, breathing in the ghost of his presence. Leather, coffee, the faint chemical tang of his printer ink. I hadn't been in here since the night of the transfer, hadn't been able to face it. The laptop still sat on his desk, closed now. His reading glasses beside it. A coffee mug with dried residue at the bottom, the last cup he'd ever drunk, probably. The thought made my chest ache. I moved to his desk chair, sank into the worn leather. How many nights had Alexander sat here building his empire, making decisions that affected hundreds of employees, discovering his son's betrayal? The framed photograph caught my eye, the two of us in Greece 20 years ago, Santorini, the white buildings cascading down to impossibly blue water. We'd been so happy then, so certain that we were building something lasting. I picked up the frame, and that's when I saw it. The photograph was slightly off-center in the frame, like it had been moved recently, removed and replaced. My pulse quickened. I pulled the backing off the frame. The photo lifted out, and behind it, a small key taped to the backing. Silver, ornate. Definitely not for a door. I turned it over. No markings, no indication of what it opened. I scanned Alexander's desk. 3 drawers on the right. 1 large drawer across the top, all unlocked, all filled with the usual detritus of business. Pens, paper clips, old contracts. But then I looked closer at the right side. 3 visible drawers, but the desk was old, solid mahogany. The proportions were wrong. There should be more internal space than the drawers accounted for. I pulled out the bottom drawer completely, set it on the floor, ran my hands along the interior of the desk cavity. Wood, wood, more wood. Then, a seam, barely visible, a hidden compartment. I found the keyhole tucked into the carved decorative molding. The key slid in like it was meant to be there, turned with a soft click. A drawer slid out, small, secret, and inside a leather journal, a USB drive, and a small glass vial filled with clear liquid, labeled only with a code, BZD-7.5 mg/ml. My hand shook as I lifted the journal. Alexander's handwriting filled the pages, dated entries spanning 6 months. I flipped to a random page. March 15th. Luke's involvement with the Meridian deal concerns me. The numbers don't add up. Vendor contracts from companies I can't verify. I've asked Stephanie in accounting to pull the records quietly. I flipped further back. January 8th. Found discrepancies in third-quarter reports. $340,000 unaccounted for. Luke signed off on the expenditures. When I questioned him, he got defensive, said I was micromanaging. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm just getting paranoid in my old age. Further forward, April 22nd. It's worse than I thought. Shell companies, fake vendors. Luke's been siphoning money for at least 3 years. $4.2 million, my own son. I confronted him today. He didn't deny it. Said I owed him, that he'd earned it by living in my shadow. The look in his eyes, I don't recognize my own child. My vision blurred. I swiped at my eyes, kept reading. May 10th, Eve came to see me today. 3rd time this month asking about my will. Just want to make sure everything's in order, Dad. She's never called me Dad before. They're planning something, I can feel it. June 3rd, Luke threatened me today. Said if I went to the police or cut him out of the will, he'd destroy the company. Make it look like I've been embezzling. That I'm too old, too sick to manage things properly. He has Eve backing him up. They've been documenting every time my hand shakes, every time I forget a name, building a case for incompetency. June 3rd, 4 months before the transfer. Alexander had known for months that our son was a threat. I flipped to the last entry, dated November 17th, the day before our dinner. If something happens, Marissa must know. Trust Fields. I've given him everything. He knows what to do. The USB has proof, but I'm running out of time. Luke cornered me after the board meeting today, told me the clock is ticking, said things were going to change whether I liked it or not. I don't think he's bluffing anymore. I'm transferring everything to Marissa tomorrow. It's the only way to protect her. If they can't get to the money, maybe they'll leave her alone. God, I hope I'm wrong about all of this. I hope I'm just a paranoid old man who's seeing plots where there are none. But if I'm right, Rissa, I'm so sorry. I should have been stronger. I should have stopped this before it got this far. Fight for us. Don't let him win. The last words were smudged, like he'd been crying when he wrote them. I clutched the journal to my chest, my whole body shaking. Alexander had known he was in danger, had documented everything, had tried to protect me. And I'd let him go to work that morning, let him walk into whatever trap Luke had set. The USB drive felt heavy in my hand. I plugged it into Alexander's laptop, my heart hammering. Folders appeared. Bank statements, email exchanges, photos, video. I opened the bank statements first. Account after account showing unauthorized transfers, money moving from Grant Industries to shell corporations with names like Meridian Consulting and Apex Holdings, dates spanning 3 years, amounts ranging from $5,000 to $500,000. $4,247,831.19. The emails were worse. Luke corresponding with people I didn't recognize, discussing restructuring Dad's holdings and managing the old man before he becomes a problem. Eve writing to someone named GV, Gerald Vance, about documentation for competency evaluation. They'd been planning this for years, building a case, waiting for the right moment to strike. The photos showed Luke meeting with Gerald Vance at a coffee shop 6 months ago. Eve having lunch with a woman whose name tag identified her as Rebecca Hollins, RN from Memorial Hospital. Why was Eve meeting with nurses? My hands hovered over the video file. For Marissa, my insurance. I clicked play. Alexander appeared on screen, sitting in this very chair, probably days before he died. He looked exhausted, old, defeated. Marissa, he began, his voice rough. If you're watching this, I'm gone and things have probably gotten complicated. Tears blurred my vision. I wiped them away, forced myself to keep watching. What I'm about to tell you will hurt, but you need to know everything. He took a deep breath. Luke has been stealing from me for 3 years, $4.2 million through fake vendor contracts and shell companies. I have proof, it's all on this USB drive. But that's not the worst part. He paused, his hand shaking as he ran it through his hair. I confronted him last month. He didn't deny it. He justified it. Said I owed him, that he'd earned it by living in my shadow. Alexander's voice cracked. My own son looked me in the eye and felt entitled to steal from me, and when I told him I was going to the police, he threatened me. My breath caught. Luke said if I exposed him, he'd destroy everything. The company's reputation, my name, yours. He's been building a case for months with Eve's help, documenting every time I forget something, every time my hand shakes. They're going to claim I'm incompetent, that I've been mismanaging the company, that you've been manipulating me. Alexander, I whispered to the screen, even though I knew he couldn't hear me. Eve's even worse than Luke. She's been meeting with nurses at Memorial. Becca Hollins, one of my regular nurses after the stroke. I don't know what they're planning, but it can't be good. He leaned closer to the camera. Risa, I'm scared. I've never said that out loud before, but I'm scared of what our son might do. That's why I'm transferring everything to you tomorrow. Luke can't touch what's legally yours. He paused, gathering himself. I've documented everything. The USB has all the evidence. Leland Fields knows what to do. I've been meeting with him secretly for months. He has copies of everything. If something happens to me, he'll help you fight. But more importantly, you have to promise me you won't give Luke a single penny. I know he's your son. I know you love him. But the Luke we raised is gone, Risa. This version, this entitled desperate version, he's dangerous. Tears streamed down my face. Alexander reached toward the camera like he could touch me through the screen. I love you more than I ever found the words to say. You were the only pure thing in my life. The only person I ever truly trusted. Whatever happens, whatever they say about me or you, remember that dinner when I asked you to trust me one last time. Remember that everything I did to protect you. He started to reach for the camera to turn it off, then stopped. One more thing. If they try to claim my death was natural, don't believe them. The vial in the drawer. I found it in my office desk yesterday, hidden in the back. I don't know how it got there. I don't know what it is, but I have a bad feeling about it. Have it tested. And Risa? His eyes bored into mine through the screen. Fight for our legacy. Don't let him rewrite who we were. Don't let him win. The video ended. I sat in the dark study, my husband's final words echoing in my ears, and felt rage replace my grief. Luke had done this. Luke and Eve had plotted and planned and maybe, probably, killed Alexander for money. And they'd tried to frame me for it. My phone showed 4:47 a.m. Too early to call anyone, but I pulled up my contacts anyway, found the name Alexander had mentioned. Leland Fields, Alexander's attorney for 20 years. A man who'd been at our wedding, who'd helped draft Alexander's first business contracts, who'd mourned with me at the funeral. A man who, apparently, knew I drafted a text, Mr. Fields, this is Marissa Grant. I found Alexander's journal in USB drive. We need to talk, soon. Please. Sent it. Then I sat back in Alexander's chair, holding his journal, and waited for sunrise. When my phone rang at 7:03 a.m., I answered before the first ring finished. Marissa. Leland Fields' voice was sharp, urgent. Don't sign anything Luke gives you, don't admit anything, and whatever you do, don't erase or destroy any of the evidence Alexander left you. I'm coming over. We have a lot to discuss. They're suing me, I said. Luke and Eve, for the transfer. I know. Gerald Vance called me yesterday fishing for information about Alexander's mental state. A pause. Marissa, did you find the video? Yes. Then you know. You know what we're dealing with. My son murdered his father. The words felt surreal, impossible. We don't know that yet. But we're going to find out. The sound of a car door, an engine starting. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Make coffee. This is going to be a long day. He hung up. I stood, my legs stiff from hours of sitting. Made my way to the kitchen. Started the coffee pot. Stood at the window watching the sun rise over the garden Alexander had loved. $25 million. A USB drive full of evidence. A glass vial of unknown substance. And a son who'd threatened his father days before. That father mysteriously died of a heart attack. The coffee pot beeped. I poured 2 cups, made them both the way Alexander liked, black, 2 sugars. Then I sat at the kitchen table and waited for Leland Fields to arrive and tell me how to prove my son was a murderer. Leland Fields arrived exactly 20 minutes later, pulling into my driveway in his silver BMW like a general arriving for battle. I watched him through the kitchen window. 62 years old, impeccably dressed even at 7 in the morning, carrying a leather messenger bag that I knew contained years of Alexander's secrets. I opened the door before he could knock. He pulled me into a brief fatherly hug. Leland had been in our lives so long he felt like family. More family than my own son, apparently. I'm so sorry. for Alexander, for all of this. Tell me everything. I led him to the kitchen, handed him one of the coffees. Alexander's video said you know what to do. So what do we do? Leland set his bag on the table, pulled out files, his tablet, a legal pad. First, I need to see everything Alexander left you. The journal, the USB, that vial he mentioned. I retrieved them from the study, my hands steadier now that I had purpose. Action was better than grief. Strategy was better than despair. Leland examined the journal first, flipping through pages with practiced efficiency. He started documenting in January. Smart. This establishes a timeline of Luke's theft and the subsequent threats. He looked up at me. Did you read the entries about Eve and
Rebecca
the nurse?
Hollins.
Eve met with her. Why? I don't know yet, but it's suspicious. He opened his tablet, pulled up a file. Alexander came to me 8 months ago, March. He'd discovered discrepancies in the company accounts, about $300,000 at that point. Asked me to quietly investigate without alerting the board or Luke. You knew. The accusation came out sharper than intended. You knew Luke was stealing, and you didn't tell me? Alexander made me promise not to. Leland's expression was pained. He wanted to handle it himself. Thought maybe he could fix it, get Luke to return the money, avoid scandal. He still loved his son, Marissa. He wanted to believe Luke could change. The words stung because they were true. Alexander had always been soft on Luke, had always seen potential where I'd seen entitlement. Maybe that's why he'd kept the truth from me, not just to protect me, but because admitting it to me would make it real, would mean accepting our son was beyond redemption. When did you know it was worse? I asked. June. Alexander brought me proof of the shell companies. By then, Luke had stolen over $4 million. Leland pulled out a thick folder from his bag. This is everything I've compiled. Bank records, corporate filings, email exchanges Luke thought were deleted but were backed up on company servers. It's airtight, Marissa. If we went to the FBI today, Luke would be arrested by tomorrow. Then why didn't Alexander go to the FBI? Leland was quiet for a moment. Because Luke threatened him, and because Alexander was trying to protect you. From what? From exactly what's happening now. He gestured at the papers on the table. Luke's plan was always to discredit Alexander, claim he was incompetent, and seize control of the company. If Alexander had gone to the police, Luke would have escalated, gone public with manufactured evidence of Alexander's declining mental state, destroyed the company's reputation and value, made it look like a desperate old man trying to blame his son for his own mistakes. I sank into a chair, the full scope of Luke's betrayal washing over me. So Alexander was trapped. Yes. Until he figured out a way around it. The transfer. Leland pulled out another document, a notarized letter. 3 weeks ago, Alexander came to my office and had me witness this. It's a statement, signed and dated, declaring that he was of sound mind and body when he decided to transfer all assets to you. He knew Luke would challenge it. He wanted proof that it was his decision, made freely and rationally. I took the letter, read Alexander's familiar handwriting. I, Alexander James Grant, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare that all financial transfers made to my wife, Marissa Ann Grant, are made of my own free will and judgment. These transfers are made to protect my estate from credible threats, and to ensure my wife's financial security. No undue influence has been exerted upon me. This is my choice, made with full awareness of its
Dated
implications.
November 10th,
a week before our dinner. He'd been planning this for weeks, I whispered. He wanted to protect you and the company. If everything was in your name, Luke couldn't touch it, couldn't claim it was his inheritance, couldn't use Alexander's death to seize control. Leland took the letter back, filed it carefully. The problem is, Luke's not giving up. Gerald Vance is good, expensive, and he's building a case that Alexander was mentally compromised.
Based on what?
Medical records. Witness testimony from employees who'll say Alexander seemed confused or forgetful in his final month's Eve statements about Alexander's behavior at home. Leland met my eyes. They're going to paint a picture of a man in cognitive decline, manipulated by his wife into signing away his fortune. Of course it's a lie, but lies told well can be very convincing. He pulled out his tablet again, opened a folder. That's why we need to be smarter. We have evidence of Luke's theft. We have Alexander's documented fears. We have this video testimony. But we need more. The vial. I pushed it across the table. Alexander said he found it in his office, said to have it tested. Leland picked it up, held it to the light. The clear liquid inside sloshed gently. BZD-7.5 mg/ml. That's a pharmaceutical code. Benzodiazepine, probably, a sedative. Why would Alexander have sedatives in his office? He wouldn't. Leland's expression darkened. His cardiologist specifically prohibited benzodiazepines after the stroke. The interaction with his heart medication could be fatal. The room tilted. Fatal. Yes. If someone gave Alexander a large enough dose, combined with his existing medications. Leland set the vial down carefully. It could absolutely trigger cardiac arrest. My throat closed. Luke killed him. We don't know that yet. But I know someone who can help us find out. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts. Celia Morrison, your friend from college. She's a pharmaceutical researcher now, right? How do you... Alexander mentioned her. Said if anything happened to him, we should have her test any suspicious substances. He was already texting. Can you call her? Ask her to test this discreetly? We need to know exactly what's in this vial and where it came from. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. Celia Morrison. We'd been roommates at Berkeley, stayed in touch over the years though we'd drifted apart. She'd come to the funeral, offered condolences. I'd barely registered her presence through my grief. I found her number, hit call. She answered on the third ring. Marissa? Hi, how are you holding up? I need your help. The words tumbled out. It's about Alexander. I found something, and I need you to test it, quietly. A pause. Can you do that? What kind of something? A vial. Pharmaceutical grade. It's labeled BZD-7.5 mg/ml. I need to know exactly what it is, where it could have come from, and what it would do to someone with Alexander's medical history. Marissa, that sounds serious. Are you saying... I'm not saying anything yet. But I need to know the truth. Please, Celia. You're the only person I trust with this. Another pause. Longer. Then, bring it to my lab. Tonight, after hours. 8 p.m. Come to the loading dock entrance on the west side of the building. And Marissa, don't tell anyone else about this. If what you're implying is true, I know. Thank you. I hung up, looked at Leland. She'll test it tonight. Good. He made notes on his legal pad. Now we need to get Alexander's complete medical records from Memorial Hospital. I'll file a formal request, but hospitals can take weeks. We need them faster. Why? Because I want to see exactly what happened the night Alexander died. Timeline. Who treated him? What medications were administered? If someone gave him benzodiazepines that night, it would show up in his blood work. He looked up at me. And I want to see if there are any irregularities in his medical records from the past year. If Eve was meeting with Nurse Hollins for a reason, it might show up in documentation. I thought about that. About Eve's perfect smile and her constant questions about Alexander's health. About her friendship with hospital staff. About the rehearsed quality of her grief at the hospital. You think they falsified his medical records, I said slowly. Made him look sicker than he was, more confused. To support their incompetency claim. It's possible. Medical records are powerful evidence in court. If they could show a pattern of cognitive decline documented by healthcare professionals, it would support their case that you manipulated him. Leland stood, started pacing my kitchen. But if they falsified records, that's fraud, and if those fake records were used to justify giving him medications that killed him, that's murder. We stared at each other across my kitchen table, the word hanging between us like a blade. I need to make a call, Leland said finally. I have a contact at the police department, Detective Sarah Moreno. She specializes in financial crimes, but she's also good with complex conspiracy cases. If I tell her what we suspect, she'll start investigating quietly. Luke will know. The moment police start asking questions, let him know. Leland's voice was hard. Let him sweat. Let him make mistakes. Right now he thinks he's won, thinks his lawsuit will intimidate you into settling. but if he knows we're building a criminal case, he might panic. Panic makes people sloppy. I thought about my son. About the boy who'd thrown tantrums when he didn't get his way. The teenager who'd lied about where he was going and who he was with. The man who'd stolen millions from his own father. Luke wasn't good under pressure. Never had been. When cornered, he lashed out, made impulsive decisions. Maybe that's exactly what we needed him to do. Call your detective, I said. Tell her everything. Leland nodded, stepped into the hallway to make the call. I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the vial that might have killed my husband, and felt the last of my maternal instincts for Luke die. He'd forced my hand, made me choose between my son and my husband's memory. It wasn't even a choice. 10 minutes later, Leland returned. Detective Moreno is very interested. She's coming by this afternoon to take your statement and collect the evidence. She's also going to request Alexander's medical records through official channels. Criminal investigations get priority. How long until we know something? Days, maybe weeks. These things take time. He sat back down, his expression sympathetic. I know this is hard, Marissa, but you need to prepare yourself for what's coming. When Luke and Eve realize we're building a criminal case, they're going to escalate their civil suit. They'll try to freeze your assets, claim you're a flight risk, paint you as a master manipulator who killed her husband for money. Let them try. I was surprised by the steel in my own voice. I have the truth, and I have Alexander's voice on video telling me to fight. Good. Leland smiled grimly. Because this is war now, and we're going to need you strong. He was right, this was war. But Luke had made a critical mistake. He'd underestimated me. For 31 years, I'd played the role of Alexander Grant's gracious wife, the hostess, the supporter, the woman who smiled at charity events and never asked too many questions about the business. Luke thought that's all I was, a decorative piece in his father's life, easy to manipulate, easy to control. He'd forgotten that I'd been married to a brilliant strategist for 3 decades, that I'd watched Alexander build an empire through careful planning and ruthless execution, that I'd learned from the best, and now I was going to use every lesson Alexander had taught me to destroy our son. What time is Detective Moreno coming? I asked. 2 p.m. I glanced at the clock. 8:47 a.m. 5 hours to prepare. I need to shower, change, look presentable. I stood, gathered the evidence from the table, and I need to write down everything I remember from that last dinner. Every word Alexander said, every detail. Good idea. Documentation is crucial. Leland started packing his files. I'll go back to my office, prepare a formal response to Luke's lawsuit. We'll file it tomorrow, make it clear we're not backing down. And Marissa? Yes? Don't talk to Luke or Eve. Not on the phone, not in person. If they contact you, let it go to voicemail. Everything they say to you now is strategic, designed to either get you to admit something or to catch you in a lie. Complete silence is your best defense. I nodded. Walked Leland to the door. He paused on the threshold, turned back. Alexander was my friend for 20 years, he said quietly. One of the best men I've ever known. If Luke did this, if he really killed his own father, I'll make sure he pays for it. I promise you that. Thank you, Leland. He left. I locked the door behind him, set the alarm, something I'd never done during the day before. But everything was different now. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, broken. But underneath the grief, underneath the exhaustion, something else was building. Rage. Cold, focused, purposeful rage. He'd get one. I showered, washing away 3 days of grief and shock. Put on makeup, not too much, just enough to look composed. Chose clothing carefully, a navy blue dress, professional but not cold. Pearls Alexander had given me for our 20th anniversary. I looked like a widow, respectable, sympathetic. Exactly what I needed to look like when I spoke to the police. By 1:45 p.m. I was ready. I'd written 6 pages of notes about that last dinner, about Alexander's warnings, about Luke's behavior at the hospital. Every detail I could remember, time-stamped, documented. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 p.m. I opened it to find a woman in her early 40s, shoulder-length dark hair pulled back, sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. She wore slacks and a blazer. A detective's shield
Mrs.
clipped to her belt. "I'm Detective Sarah Moreno." She extended her hand. "This is my partner, Detective James Halpern." The man behind her was older, graying, with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much. He nodded at me politely. "Please, come in." I led them to the living room, the same room where Luke had threatened me 3 days ago. I'd cleaned it since then. Erased the physical evidence of that encounter, but the memory lingered like smoke. Detective Moreno sat on the sofa, pulled out a notebook. "Mr. Fields briefed me on the situation. I understand your husband transferred significant assets to you shortly before his death and that your son is now contesting that transfer." "That's correct. And you believe your son may have been involved in your husband's death." The words, spoken aloud by a police detective, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Yes, I do." "Walk me through everything," Moreno said. "Start from the beginning. When did you first suspect something was wrong?" So I told her. All of it. The dinner. Alexander's fear, the transfer, his warnings about Luke, the funeral, Luke's lawsuit, finding the journal and USB drive and vial. I spoke for 40 minutes straight. Moreno took notes, asked clarifying questions, never interrupted the flow. Halpern recorded everything on his phone with my permission. When I finished, Moreno sat back. "That's quite a story. It's the truth." "I believe you." She glanced at her partner, who nodded. "But believing you and proving it are two different things. We'll need to verify everything, the financial records, the timeline of Alexander's death, the contents of that vial. I'm having it tested tonight. I gave her Celia's information. She'll have results by tomorrow." "Good. We'll need those." Moreno flipped through her notes. "Mrs. Grant, I need to ask you something directly. Did you in any way coerce or manipulate your husband into making those transfers?" "No." "Did you have any knowledge of your son's theft before your husband told you that night?" "No." "Have you altered, destroyed, or hidden any evidence related to this case?" "No. Everything Alexander left me is exactly as I found it." She studied me for a long moment. "I'm going to be honest with you. This case is complicated. Your son has money, connections, and a good lawyer. Even if we prove he stole from his father, that doesn't necessarily prove he killed him. Heart attacks happen. Unless we can prove he gave Alexander something that triggered that heart attack and prove it was intentional, we don't have murder. We have financial fraud. The vial, at best, might not be connected to Alexander's death at all. We don't know where it came from, how long it had been in his office, or if Alexander even knew what it was." She held up a hand as I started to protest. "I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying we need more. We need to establish that benzodiazepines were in Alexander's system when he died. We need to prove how they got there. And ideally, we need proof that Luke or Eve obtained them and administered them. How do we get that proof?" "Medical records, blood work from the ER, security footage from your husband's office, pharmacy records, witness testimony." She ticked items off on her fingers. "It's going to take time, but if the evidence is there, we'll find it." Halpern spoke for the first time. "We'll also look into Eve Grant's relationship with hospital staff. If she was meeting with nurses, there should be phone records, emails, maybe financial transactions if money changed hands." "So what do I do?" I asked. "Just wait?" "Stay visible. Keep living your normal life as much as possible. Let Luke and Eve think you're just a grieving widow fighting a civil suit." Moreno closed her notebook. "Meanwhile, we'll be digging, quietly. The less they know about the criminal investigation, the better. And if they do something, if they try to hurt me or—" "Call 911 immediately. Then call me." She handed me her card. "My cell number's on there, anytime, day or night. If you feel threatened, if you receive threats, if anything unusual happens, call me." I took the card, held it like a talisman. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Moreno stood. "We haven't proven anything. But, Mrs. Grant, off the record?" She met my eyes. "I've been doing this job for 18 years. I've seen a lot of grieving widows." "You're not performing grief. You're performing strength. That tells me you believe your husband was murdered. and that tells me there's probably something here worth investigating. She and Halpern left with copies of the journal, the USB drive, and photographs of the vial. The originals stayed with me, Leland's advice. I watched them drive away, then locked the door and returned to Alexander's study. The video was still on the laptop. I played it again, watched my husband warn me about our son, listened to him tell me to fight. Fighting, I whispered to his image. I promise you, Alexander, I'm going to prove what Luke did, and I'm going to make sure he pays for it. The video ended. The screen went dark, and I sat in the silence of my dead husband's study, planning my son's destruction. At 8 p.m., I pulled into the loading dock of Morrison Research Laboratories, my headlights cutting through the darkness. The industrial area was deserted, most businesses closed for the night, perfect for what we needed, privacy. Celia Morrison appeared in the doorway, waving me inside. I grabbed the vial, carefully wrapped in bubble wrap, preserved exactly as I'd found it, and hurried through the cold night air. "Thank you for doing this," I said, as she locked the door behind me. Of course. Celia led me through stark white hallways, past darkened laboratories, to her personal workspace. "Marissa, before we start, are you absolutely sure you want to know what's in that vial?" She turned to face me, her expression grave. "Because if it's what I think it is, and if it's connected to Alexander's death, then you're not just dealing with a family dispute anymore. You're dealing with murder, and once you have proof, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back." I handed her the vial. "I want the truth." Celia nodded, took the vial to her workstation. "This will take a few hours. I need to run a full spectroscopic analysis, check the compound against pharmaceutical databases, and verify the concentration. You can wait here if you want, or—" "I'll wait." She gestured to a chair in the corner. "Make yourself comfortable. There's coffee in the break room if you need it." I sat and watched her work. Watched her carefully extract a sample from the vial, place it under various machines that hummed and beeped and displayed colorful graphs on computer screens. The science was beyond me, but the intensity of her focus was reassuring. 2 hours later, Celia turned from her computer, her face pale. "What is it?" I asked, already knowing from her expression that it was bad. "It's benzodiazepine. Specifically a high-concentration compound, 7.5 milligrams per milliliter. That's prescription strength, probably meant to be diluted before administration." She pulled up images on her screen. "But that's not the concerning part." "What's the concerning part?" "This particular formulation is specialized. It's fast-acting, designed for acute anxiety or sedation in medical settings, and it's contraindicated for patients with certain heart conditions or those taking specific cardiac medications." She looked at me. If Alexander had this in his system combined with his usual medications, it could absolutely trigger cardiac arrhythmia or arrest. I gripped the arms of my chair. Could, or would. Would. Almost certainly. Celia's voice was gentle. "Marissa, if someone gave Alexander even 2 to 3 milliliters of this compound, knowing his medical history, they'd be committing murder. There's no other way to describe it. Can you trace where it came from?" She turned back to her computer, pulled up more data. The compound signature suggests it was manufactured by Apex Pharmaceuticals. They supply primarily to hospitals and specialized medical facilities. This isn't something you can buy at a regular pharmacy. It would need to be prescribed by a doctor and dispensed through a controlled system. What if someone forged a prescription? Then there would be records, pharmacy logs, insurance claims, inventory tracking. She made notes on her pad. If this was obtained through legitimate channels, we can trace it. If someone forged documentation to get it, that's even more evidence of premeditation. I pulled out Detective Moreno's card. "I need to call someone." Moreno answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Grant, is everything okay?" "I'm at Morrison Research Labs." Celia tested the vial. "It's benzodiazepine, prescription strength, the kind that would kill Alexander if combined with his heart medication." A pause. "Can you come here?" "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't leave. Don't let anyone else leave. We need to preserve the chain of evidence." She hung up. I relayed the message to Celia, who nodded and began carefully documenting her findings, photographing every screen, printing reports. "If this goes to trial," she said as she worked, "I'll need to testify about my analysis. You understand that, right? This could get messy." "Everything is already messy." I watched her secure the vial in an evidence bag. "My son probably killed my husband. It can't get worse than that." "I'm sorry, Marissa. I really am." She sealed the bag, signed and dated it. "Alexander was a good man. He didn't deserve this. No, he didn't." Detective Moreno arrived with Halpern in tow. They took statements from both of us, collected Celia's analysis reports and the secured vial, asked technical questions about pharmaceutical tracking and prescription protocols. "Good," Moreno said finally, carefully packing the evidence. "This is very good. But we still need to prove Alexander had this in his system when he died. His blood work from the ER should show benzodiazepines if they were present." "And if they do?" I asked. "Then we have a murder weapon. We just need to prove who gave it to him." She met my eyes, which means we need to trace how this vial got into Alexander's office, and we need to find out if Luke or Eve had access to it. "Eve was meeting with nurses," I said. "Alexander documented it in his journals." "I know. We're already looking into her." Moreno closed her evidence bag. "Mrs. Grant, I need you to be prepared for something. When we start pulling medical records and pharmaceutical logs, people are going to notice. Hospital administrators, doctors, pharmacy staff. And they're going to talk." "You mean Luke will find out. And when he does, he's going to lawyer up even more. Might try to leave the country, might try to intimidate witnesses." She handed me a new card. "This is my direct line to our witness protection coordinator. If you feel unsafe at any point, if Luke or Eve contact you, if you notice anyone following you, anything, you call this number immediately." The reality of what we were doing hit me. This wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. This was a criminal investigation into murder, and my son was the primary suspect. What happens next? My voice sounded hollow. We get Alexander's medical records and blood work. We trace the pharmaceutical trail. We interview witnesses. Moreno's tone was businesslike, and we build a case that will stand up in court. "It's going to take time, Mrs. Grant. But if Luke did this, we're going to prove it." Celia drove me back to my car. I was too shaky to be alone in the parking lot. "Call me if you need anything," she said, hugging me goodbye. "And Marissa, be careful. If Luke killed Alexander, you're the only thing standing between him and $25 million. That makes you a target." I drove home through empty streets, checking my rearview mirror obsessively for cars that might be following me. Every shadow looked threatening. Every pair of headlights behind me seemed suspicious. By the time I reached my house, it was nearly midnight. I set the alarm, locked every door and window, and went to Alexander's study. I needed to watch the video again. Needed to hear his voice. I pulled up the file, hit play. Alexander's face filled the screen, and this time I noticed details I'd missed before. The way his hand shook when he ran it through his hair, the way his eyes kept darting to something off camera like he was afraid someone might walk in. The fear in his voice when he talked about Luke. The love in his eyes when he talked about me. I watched it twice, 3 times, memorizing every word, every expression, Marissa, every warning. If you're watching this, I'm gone and things have probably gotten complicated. Complicated. That was an understatement. What I'm about to tell you will hurt, but you need to know everything. He'd been right. It did hurt. Every word was a knife. Luke has been stealing from me for 3 years. $4.2 million through fake vendor contracts and shell companies. I have proof. It's all on this USB drive. But that's not the worst part. I could recite it from memory now. The betrayal, the threats, my own son looked me in the eye and felt entitled to steal from me. And when I told him I was going to the police, he threatened me. What had Luke threatened exactly? The video didn't specify, but Alexander's face when he said it, that was the face of a man who knew his life was in danger. Luke said if I exposed him, he'd destroy everything. The company's reputation, my name, yours. He's been building a case for months with Eve's help, documenting every time I forget something, every time my hand shakes. That's what this was. Months of planning, building evidence, setting the stage. I'm scared. I've never said that out loud before, but I'm scared of what our son might do. Alexander Grant, the man who'd built a fortune from nothing, who'd survived a stroke and come back stronger, who'd faced down corporate raiders and hostile takeovers, scared of his own child. That's why I'm transferring everything to you tomorrow. Luke can't touch what's legally yours. He'd tried to protect me, tried to keep me safe. And now it was my job to finish what he'd started. I love you more than I ever found the words to say. You were the only pure thing in my life, the only person I ever truly trusted. Tears blurred the screen. I wiped them away angrily. No more crying. Crying was for later, after justice was served. Whatever happens, whatever they say about me or you, remember that dinner when I asked you to trust me one last time. Remember that everything I did to protect you. I remember, I whispered to the screen. I remember everything, Alexander, and I'm going to make sure Luke pays for what he did to you. The video ended. I sat in the darkness, my husband's final message echoing in my mind, and made a promise. Luke thought he'd won, thought his lawsuit would intimidate me into giving him what he wanted, thought his mother would be too weak, too grief-stricken, too naive to fight back. He was wrong. I was Alexander Grant's wife. I'd learned from the best strategist in the business world, and now I was going to use every lesson he'd taught me to destroy the son who destroyed him. Tomorrow, Detective Moreno would get Alexander's medical records. Tomorrow, we'd start tracing the pharmaceutical trail. Tomorrow, the net would begin closing around Luke and Eve. But tonight, I sat in my dead husband's study, and I planned. Planned how to prove murder. Planned how to protect the fortune Alexander had built. Planned how to ensure that our son spent the rest of his life in prison for what he'd done. The clock struck 1 a.m. I should sleep, should rest. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Alexander's face in that video, heard his fear, felt his love. So instead, I opened his journal again and read every entry, memorized every date, every detail, every warning sign he documented. By dawn, I knew that journal better than I knew my own memories. By dawn, I was ready for war. I'd stopped being Marissa Grant, the grieving widow. I'd become something else entirely. I'd become the weapon Alexander had forged to bring our son to justice. Detective Moreno called at 9:47 a.m. with news that made my heart pound. We got Alexander's medical records from Memorial Hospital. Mrs. Grant, you need to see these. Can you come to the station? I'll be there in 20 minutes. I dressed carefully. Another widow's outfit, this time charcoal gray with minimal jewelry. Professional. Composed. The mask I was learning to wear while rage burned underneath. The police station was exactly what I'd expected. Fluorescent lights, tired officers, the smell of coffee and stress. Moreno met me at reception, led me through a maze of desks to a conference room where Halpern waited, with files spread across the table. These are Alexander's complete medical records, Moreno said, gesturing to the papers. From his stroke 5 years ago through his death. And Mrs. Grant, there are problems. What kind of problems? Halpern slid a file toward me. These are records from Alexander's regular cardiology appointments over the past year. According to these notes, Dr. Raymond Choi documented increasing cognitive impairment, memory loss, and anxiety requiring medication. I scanned the pages. Alexander was sharp until the day he died. He ran a multi-million-dollar company. There was no cognitive impairment. That's what concerns us. Moreno opened another file. Because according to these records, Dr. Choi prescribed benzodiazepines for Alexander's anxiety in August, 3 months before his death. The room temperature dropped. His cardiologist would never prescribe benzodiazepines. Alexander told me they were contraindicated with his heart medication. Exactly. Moreno tapped the prescription record. So we called Dr. Choi this morning. He's adamant he never prescribed benzodiazepines to Alexander Grant, never documented cognitive decline, and never saw Alexander after July. These appointments in August, September, and October Someone falsified his medical records. I said slowly. Yes, and we know who. Halpern pulled out another document, pharmacy records. This prescription was filled at Mercy Pharmacy on August 3rd using Alexander's insurance, but security footage from that day shows the person who picked up the medication wasn't Alexander. He slid a grainy photograph across the table, a woman in sunglasses and a baseball cap, but the profile was unmistakable. Rebecca Hollins, the nurse from Memorial Hospital. Oh my God. My hands shook as I held the photo. Eve was meeting with her. Alexander documented it in his journal. We found phone records between Nurse Hollins and Eve Grant. Moreno opened her laptop, showed me call logs, 17 calls over 3 months, and bank records show Eve made 2 payments to Hollins, $15,000 total, disguised as consulting fees. She paid her to forge records and get the medication. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. They planned this for months, built a paper trail showing Alexander was declining mentally, got the medication that would kill him, and waited for the right moment. That's our theory, Moreno agreed. But we need more. We need to prove Alexander had benzodiazepines in his system when he died. His blood work from the ER shows elevated levels of benzodiazepines consistent with recent administration. Halpern's voice was grim. Enough to trigger cardiac arrest in someone with his condition. Time of death was 6:47 p.m. according to hospital records. The medication was likely administered within the hour before. My breath caught. Luke was with him. Luke called me at 6:23 saying Alexander had collapsed. They were alone in Alexander's office. We know. We've requested security footage from Grant Industries for that day. Moreno made notes. But Mrs. Grant, there's something else. Something in the medical records that's very concerning. She pulled out another file. Alexander's admission notes from the ER. When paramedics brought Alexander in, they noted he was unresponsive with no pulse. Standard procedure for suspected cardiac arrest. But look at this. She pointed to a line in the notes. Attending nurse, Rebecca Hollins, RN. The world tilted. She was there. The nurse Eve paid off. She was there when Alexander was brought in. Yes, and she was the one who handled his initial triage, his medication log, his blood draws. Moreno's expression was dark, which means she had access to alter anything she wanted, add medications to his chart that were never administered, remove evidence of benzodiazepines, change timelines. But you said his blood work showed benzodiazepines. Because we pulled the original lab results directly from the laboratory database, not from the hospital's patient records. Halpern leaned forward. Hospital records show no benzodiazepines in his system. Lab records show lethal levels. Someone altered the hospital copy. Rebecca Hollins, I said. We're bringing her in for questioning today. Moreno confirmed. With the pharmacy records, the falsified medical documents, the payment from Eve, and now evidence of tampering with Alexander's final blood work, we have enough to arrest her on multiple charges. And once we have her in custody, she'll talk. People like this always do when they realize they're facing prison time. What about Luke and Eve? My voice was harder than I'd ever heard it. When do they get arrested? Soon. But we need to be strategic. Moreno closed the files. Right now, we have evidence against Hollins. We have evidence of Luke's embezzlement. We have suspicious circumstances around Alexander's death, but we don't have definitive proof that Luke or Eve administered the fatal dose. That's what we need Hollins to give us. She'll protect them. Eve paid her $15,000. We're offering immunity from murder charges in exchange for testimony. Moreno's smile was cold. Trust me, she'll take the deal. I wanted to argue. Wanted them to arrest Luke immediately. Haul him out of his expensive house in handcuffs. But I understood strategy. Understood patience. Alexander had taught me that. Sometimes you had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. How long? I asked. Days. Maybe a week. We need to coordinate with the DA's office, get the warrants in order, make sure our case is airtight. Moreno stood. Meanwhile, Luke and Eve don't know we're closing in. Let's keep it that way. Let them think their civil lawsuit is working. And if they try something, let them get comfortable. If they come after me, We have a patrol car driving past your house every 2 hours, and you have my direct number." She walked me to the door. "Mrs. Grant, I know waiting is hard, but we're going to get justice for Alexander. I left the police station with my mind racing. Falsified medical records, forged prescriptions, paid-off nurses, a conspiracy to murder that had been months in the making. My son and daughter-in-law were monsters. I was halfway home when my phone rang. Leland Fields. "Marissa, where are you?" "Leaving the police station. Moreno showed me Alexander's medical records." "I know." She called me. "Listen, we need to meet. There's been a development in Luke's civil suit." 20 minutes later, "Can you come to my office?" I sat in Leland's mahogany-paneled office while he paced behind his desk. Gerald Vance filed an emergency motion this morning requesting the court freeze all assets transferred from Alexander to you, pending the outcome of their investigation into undue influence. Can they do that? They can request it. Whether the judge grants it is another matter. He stopped pacing, faced me. "Marissa, they're escalating. Luke knows something's wrong. Maybe he's heard whispers about the police investigation. Maybe he's just impatient, but this motion suggests he's getting desperate." "Good. Let him be desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, but they also do dangerous things." Leland sat down heavily. "I'm worried about your safety. If Luke knows we're building a criminal case, if he realizes the net is closing." I finished the thought. "I know. Moreno's already increased patrols around my house." "That's not enough. Marissa, I want you to consider staying somewhere else for a few days. A hotel, a friend's house, anywhere Luke wouldn't think to look." "No." My voice was firm. "I'm not running from my own son. That's my house. Alexander's house. I'm not abandoning it. Alexander would want you safe. Alexander would want me to fight, and that's what I'm doing." I stood. "When's the hearing for Luke's motion?" "Tomorrow. 2 p.m., Judge Morrison's courtroom." Leland sighed. "I'll argue against the asset freeze. Present Alexander's notarized statement about being of sound mind. But Marissa, you should prepare yourself. The judge might grant a partial freeze as a precaution. Then I'll deal with it." I headed for the door. "Is there anything else?" "Yes. One more thing." Leland's voice stopped me. "I had my investigators look into Eve's background. Before she married Luke. And? She's had 3 previous relationships, all with wealthy older men. One ended in a lawsuit over financial assets, another in a restraining order. The third man died of a heart attack 2 years before she met Luke. The implications hung in the air like poison gas. "She's done this before," I whispered. "We can't prove anything about the death. It was ruled natural causes. But the pattern is concerning. Eve targets wealthy men, ingratiates herself into their lives, then things end badly." Leland handed me a file. "This is everything we found. You should give it to Detective Moreno." I took the file with numb fingers. Eve wasn't just a co-conspirator. She might be the mastermind. "Luke married a black widow," I said. "Or she found the perfect mark. A wealthy heir with entitlement issues and a complicated relationship with his father." Leland's expression was grim. Either way, they're a dangerous combination. I drove home with Eve's file on the passenger seat, my mind reeling. How had I missed this? How had Alexander missed it? But I knew the answer. We'd wanted Luke to be happy. Wanted to believe his wife was good for him. We'd ignored the red flags. Her constant questions about money, her manipulation of family situations, her perfect performance of the devoted daughter-in-law. We'd been blind. And Alexander had paid for it with his life. The call came at 11 p.m., 3 days after my meeting with Moreno. I was in bed not sleeping, staring at the ceiling and counting the hours until Rebecca Hollins's interrogation. "Mrs. Grant?" Detective Moreno's voice was tight with excitement. "We have a witness. Someone who was at Grant Industries the night Alexander died. He saw everything." I bolted upright. "Who?" "Rafael Torres. The evening custodian. He was cleaning the executive floor when Luke and Alexander had their confrontation. Can you come to the station first thing tomorrow? He's giving his statement at 9 a.m., and I think you should hear it." I was there at 8:45 a.m., coffee in hand. nerves stretched to breaking. Moreno met me in the hallway outside interview room 2. "He's scared," she warned. "Someone threatened him after Alexander's death, told him to keep quiet. But when he saw the news about our investigation, he decided to come forward." "What did he see?" "Listen for yourself." Rafael Torres sat at the metal table, late 50s, tired eyes, work-worn hands clutching a coffee cup. He looked up when I entered, recognition crossing his face. "Mrs. Grant, I'm so sorry about Mr. Alexander. He was a good man." "Thank you, Rafael." I sat across from him. "Detective Moreno said you saw something the night he died." He nodded slowly. "I've been cleaning Grant Industries for 15 years. Mr. Alexander always treated me with respect. Said hello, asked about my family. Not like some of the executives who look right through you." "He was like that." "That night," I said November softly, "20th, I was on the executive floor doing my usual rounds. Start at 5 p.m., work through the offices, empty the trash, vacuum, finish around midnight." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "Around 6 p.m., I was in the hallway outside Mr. Alexander's office. His door was closed, but I could hear voices, shouting." "What were they saying?" Moreno prompted. Luke was yelling, "You can't cut me out of what's mine, I've earned this." And Mr. Alexander, his voice was quieter but angry. He said, "You stole from this family, you betrayed everything I built." Raphael's hands shook. Then Luke said something about how Mr. Alexander owed him, that he'd been living in his shadow his whole life and deserved compensation. My nails dug into my palms. What else? Mr. Alexander said he was going to the police, that Luke would face consequences. And Luke... Raphael swallowed hard. Luke laughed. Said, "You're not going to the police. You're not going anywhere." It sounded like a threat. "What happened then?" Halpern asked. The shouting stopped. Maybe 10 minutes of quiet. I kept working, moved down the hall to the next office. Then I heard a crash. Something heavy hitting the floor. Raphael's voice dropped. I came running back. Luke burst out of the office looking pale, panicked. He saw me and froze for a second. Then he ran back inside, started yelling for help. "So you saw Mr. Grant on the floor?" "Yes." Mr. Alexander was collapsed behind his desk, not moving. Luke was on his phone, and I heard him say something strange before he called 911. Every nerve in my body went taut. "What did he say?" "He said it's done." Like he was reporting to someone. Then he hung up and immediately dialed 911, started crying, saying his father had collapsed, acting all panicked. Raphael met my eyes. But before that, for maybe 30 seconds, he just stood there looking at his father, not helping, not trying CPR, just looking, like he was making sure. Making sure Alexander was dead. I gripped the table to steady myself. "Did you tell anyone this?" Moreno asked. I told the first responders what I'd heard. The argument, the crash. They said they'd include it in their report. Raphael's expression darkened. But 2 days later, a man came to my workstation, never seen him before. He didn't say anything, just stared at me for a long minute. I got the message, keep quiet about what I saw. Halpern showed him photos. "Is this the man?" Raphael pointed immediately. "That one. Gerald Vance, Luke's lawyer. Intimidating witnesses. Why come forward now?" "Because I saw the news about your investigation. About Mr. Alexander maybe being murdered." Raphael's voice cracked. "I have a son too, Mrs. Grant, and if he ever did something like this to me, I'd want someone to tell the truth, no matter how scary it was." Tears blurred my vision. "Thank you, Raphael. Thank you for being brave." After he left, Moreno pulled up security footage from Grant Industries. "We got this yesterday. Watch." The video showed the hallway outside Alexander's office. Timestamp, 5:30 p.m., November 20th. Luke appeared carrying a small leather bag. He looked around, checking if anyone was watching, then entered Alexander's office. "That's not his usual briefcase," I noted. "No. It's a medical bag. The kind doctors use for house calls." Moreno fast-forwarded. "Luke stays in there for 25 minutes. Then watch." At 5:55 p.m., raised voices, no audio but body language visible through the frosted glass of Alexander's door. Two figures arguing, one gesturing wildly. At 6:10 p.m., Luke emerged, pale and shaken, made a phone call, his lips moving but no sound. At 6:12 p.m., he re-entered the office. At 6:15 p.m., Raphael appeared in the hallway, pushing his cleaning cart. At 6:17 p.m., a crash, visible through the frosted glass, a body falling. At 6:19 p.m., Luke burst from the office, saw Raphael froze. At 6:20 p.m., Luke re-entered, made another phone call. At 6:21 p.m., Raphael entered the office. At 6:27 p.m., paramedics arrived. He waited 8 minutes before calling 911, I said. Why? Because he needed to make sure Alexander was dead, and he needed to call someone first. Moreno replayed the footage. We're pulling Luke's phone records for that day. We'll know exactly who he called. It was probably Eve, Halpern said, telling her the plan worked. The plan. They'd planned my husband's murder down to the minute. What was in the bag? I asked, pointing to the leather case Luke had carried in. We're getting a warrant to search Luke and Eve's house. If that bag is there, we'll find it. And if it contains benzodiazepines or medical supplies. Moreno let the implication hang. When? Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. We're also arresting Rebecca Hollins tonight. By tomorrow afternoon, we should have everything we need to bring charges against Luke and Eve for conspiracy to commit murder. Tomorrow. After weeks of investigation, weeks of grief and rage and planning, tomorrow we'd have justice. I want to be there, I said. When you arrest them, that's not protocol. I want to see their faces. I don't care about protocol. They killed my husband and tried to frame me. I've earned the right to watch them get arrested. Moreno and Halpern exchanged glances. Finally, Moreno nodded. You can be there, but you stay in the car. You don't approach them. You don't say anything. Understood? Understood. That night, I barely slept. Kept checking my phone, waiting for updates. At 2:37 a.m., Moreno texted, Hollins arrested. Already asking for a deal. I gave up on sleep. Showered. Dressed in black. Widow's weeds for my son's arrest. At 5:45 a.m., I met Moreno and Halpern 3 blocks from Luke's house in Blackhawk, their unmarked car, my Mercedes behind it, backup unit staging nearby. Hollins broke last night, Moreno told me. Gave us everything. Eve approached her 6 months ago at a hospital fundraiser, offered $15,000 to forge Alexander's medical records and obtain benzodiazepines. Hollins thought it was for a competency evaluation, didn't realize it was for murder until Alexander died. Then Eve paid her another $15,000 to alter his ER records and keep quiet. Did she say who administered the fatal dose? Eve coached him on exactly how much to give, when to give it, how to make it look like natural cardiac arrest. They practiced for weeks. Moreno's expression was disgusted. This wasn't a crime of passion, Mrs. Grant. This was calculated murder. At 6 a.m. exactly, we moved. 4 police cars surrounded Luke's sprawling modern house. Officers positioned at every exit. Moreno and Halpern approached the front door, warrant in hand. I watched from the car, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The door opened. Luke appeared in pajama pants and a t-shirt, hair disheveled. His expression went from confused to terrified in an instant. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, first-degree murder, financial fraud, and obstruction of justice. Moreno's voice carried across the lawn. You have the right to remain silent. Luke's knees buckled. Officers caught him, yanked his hands behind his back. Handcuffs clicked into place. Eve appeared in the doorway, screaming, What are you doing? You can't just— Eve Grant, you're also under arrest. She tried to run, made it 3 steps before Halpern caught her, wrestled her to the ground. More handcuffs, more screaming. Neighbors appeared on their lawns, phones out, recording everything. Luke saw them and crumbled completely, sobbing into the officer's arms. I didn't mean to. It was her idea. Eve said we had to, said Dad would never— Shut up, Eve shrieked. Don't say anything, you idiot. But Luke was beyond rational thought. He was going to cut me out. After everything I'd done, he was going to give it all to Mom. It wasn't fair. Moreno caught my eye across the lawn, money, nodded once. This was it. Justice. Officers loaded Luke and Eve into separate cars. Luke still crying, still babbling. Eve silent now, her expression cold and calculating even in handcuffs. As the cars drove past, Eve's eyes found mine through the window. And in that moment, I saw what Alexander had seen months ago, the absolute lack of remorse, the predatory intelligence, the entitled rage of someone who'd been caught. She'd played my son like an instrument, weaponized his resentment, turned him into a killer, and now they'd both pay. The trial began 8 months after the arrests. The evidence was overwhelming. Celia's pharmaceutical analysis, the forged prescriptions, Holland's testimony about Eve's manipulation and Luke's hands administering the fatal dose, security footage, phone records showing Luke called Eve immediately after Alexander collapsed. The prosecution built an airtight case. Luke and Eve had spent months planning Alexander's murder, forging medical records to establish incompetency, obtaining lethal medications, and executing their plan with cold precision, all for money. Luke's defense collapsed under cross-examination. He claimed Eve manipulated him, that he'd only wanted to talk to his father, that the benzodiazepines were just to calm Alexander down. But Raphael's testimony destroyed that story. "It's done," Luke had said. "An admission of completion, not an accident." Eve maintained her innocence until the very end. Claimed she'd only been helping Luke manage his difficult father. But the paper trail was damning. Her payments to Hollands, her meeting history, her calculated isolation of Alexander from family, friends. The verdicts came down like hammer blows. Luke, guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse, 25 years to life. Eve, guilty on all counts, 15 years. I sat in the gallery as each verdict was read, Alexander's journal in my hands, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The civil case dissolved immediately. Judge Morrison dismissed Luke's lawsuit with prejudice. The evidence shows Alexander Grant acted with full capacity and clear intent in protecting his assets from a son who had been systematically stealing from him. The transfers were legal, appropriate, and prescient given subsequent events. Luke's embezzlement trial followed, another guilty verdict, another sentence running concurrent with his murder conviction. Gerald Vance was disbarred for witness intimidation, facing 3 years for obstruction of justice. I testified at every proceeding, calm, methodical, devastating. When the prosecutor played Alexander's video for the jury, several wept. Luke stared at the floor, unable to watch his father's final message. "I love you more than I ever found the words to say," Alexander's voice echoed through the courtroom. "You were the only pure thing in my life." And I realized he'd been telling the truth. In a family poisoned by greed and betrayal, our love had been the only trial. I stood in the renovated Grant Industries headquarters. I'd restructured everything: new leadership, transparency protocols, ethics training. The Alexander Grant Foundation for Business Ethics operated from the 4th floor, helping other families navigate financial elder abuse. I visited Alexander's grave on our anniversary, told him about the verdicts, the company's recovery, the foundation bearing his name. "You asked me to trust you that last dinner," I said to his headstone. "You asked me to be strong. I was, Alexander. I fought for us, and I won." I placed roses, the same ones from our wedding, and walked away. Not toward an ending, but toward a beginning. I'd received letters from other families facing similar betrayals. Requests for advice, for guidance, for hope. I was writing a book about financial elder abuse, using our story to help others. In Alexander's study, I played his video one final time. "Fight for our legacy. Don't let him rewrite who we were." "I didn't," I whispered. "Your name is restored, your legacy lives on, and our son is in prison where he belongs." I closed the laptop. After months of grief and rage and justice, I finally felt something unexpected. Peace. Alexander had protected me with his final act, and I'd protected his memory with mine. The fortune stayed mine. The company thrived. The foundation grew. And every day, I woke up knowing I'd done exactly what Alexander had asked. I'd fought. I'd won.